Hey guys, Drifter here. I've been suffering from a debilitating illness for about half a decade now, and despite the best efforts of over 100 doctors and thousands of tests, the diagnosis remains unknown. I haven't had much in the way of treatment because, well, nobody knows what condition to treat, and unsurprisingly, with no treatment, I'm only getting worse with time. Whatever my problem is has caused a permanently broken spine, extraordinary full body pain, profound weakness in my hands, and has recently limited my ability to speak, which is why I'm going to have to record this video over several days. I'm afraid that I'm circling the drain here, and I don't know how much time I have left before I have to live in a care home. So today, I'm going to be telling my entire medical story from start to finish, and also making all of my medical records public, the purpose of which is to beg the greater internet for help diagnosing whatever this mystery illness is. I'm asking all of you to take a look at these documents and offer your insights or share them with any medical professionals or medical organizations that might want to help. You'll find links to all the documents, patient summaries, and my contact information all down there below in the description of this video. It's all going to be very easy to find. We even have a Discord channel set up if you want to chat with others about this. I'm also going to allow for unlimited re-uploading, editing, reacting, and sharing of this video and its associated contents across any platform. You'll never get a copyright strike from me because I want this call for help to go as far and as wide as possible. The reason for that is because there are thousands of medical professionals that run YouTube channels, and if you happen to be fans of any of them, I would appreciate it if you would share this video with those medical YouTubers. It's potentially free reaction or analysis content for them, and it helps spread this story to their wider audience that is also disproportionately composed of medical professionals. I realize that making my medical records public, many of which, as you'll see, are unflattering, is an extreme measure to take, but it matches the depths of my desperation with this problem because I want to live and I want to be well again. I'm tired of being the world's sickest man. The documents in the description of this video have been depersonalized because many of the original laboratory results are on files with my full name, date of birth, address, phone number, patient number, or even the doctor's name on them. And I think there's no point in getting well if I destroy my privacy and safety in the process. So I used Claude to sort through thousands of documents, highlight anomalous results, and compile depersonalized data into easy-to-read summaries that are sorted by medical subspecialty. I also double-checked all the documents myself and cross-referenced to make sure there were no AI hallucinations, and Claude did a pretty good job of organizing all of this. If a medical organization or doctor reaches out to me and would like to see the original lab reports, I can provide those as needed, but for now, for the sake of my safety and privacy, the validity of my claims will have to be just trust me, bro, and that probably doesn't help with the huge portion of the internet that's convinced that I'm a hypochondriac or that I have Munchausen's syndrome or something like that, but it's necessary for my safety. The documents linked below include my entire medical history and all of my mental health records. And as a warning, not all of these are pleasant to read about. They contain details about some things that happened to me as a child that I've never shared on this channel or elsewhere. It's just important and relevant to include given the sheer amount of people, even medical professionals, that believe I have a mental health problem instead of a medical one. Another important thing that I wanted to add before we get going is that I'm not looking for help from alternative medicine or podcast medicine. Guys, I have heard the gospel of Mikhaila Peterson and the red meat diet and the carnivore diet and vegan dieting and paleo and fasting and cold plunges. I've tried all of these diets already. None of them worked. If they worked for you, that's great. I'm glad that helped you, but my problem is way beyond your average podcaster's ability to handle. I don't want to hear from any doctors of homeopathy, naturopathy, iridologists, chiropractors, herbalists, Eastern medicine doctors, and especially not faith healers. I don't need more prayers, a prayer subscription that I got to pay for, or a change to my religion. I don't need skinny teas, nutraceuticals, peptides, or energy healing. And I also don't need a million people telling me that this is a COVID vaccine injury because I developed these symptoms back in 2017, which was 3 years before COVID was even a thing. So unless that vaccine was made of tachyons that can travel backwards in time, my problem is most assuredly not a vaccine complication. Well, without any further ado, I'm going to present my case as if I were a patient in a clinic, starting with my current symptoms and presentation, then a brief medical history, and then we're going to move into sections of anomalous laboratory results based on subspecialty. It's a wild ride that includes everything from mast cell problems to IgG4 related disease to tick-borne illnesses. So I would encourage you to take a look at the video chapters down here if you want to skip to a particular symptom. My goodness, that has fried my voice. I'll be back tomorrow to start the medical history. So if I were to come into your clinic with a list of symptoms and complaints, my number one complaint would be that I'm dealing with migrating polyarthralgia that for the past 5 years has been this joint hurts and then it gets better and then this joint hurts and it kind of moves around for no clear reason. But recently it's moved on to just full body arthralgia from toes up to my jaw, including TMJ, sensitive knees, weak elbows, and it's especially bad in my fingers and toes. My extremities seem to get it worse than anything else. The type of arthralgia is not Ehlers-Danlos. I've been cleared of genetic and non-genetic Ehlers-Danlos, and it doesn't appear to be something like seronegative rheumatoid arthritis because it doesn't swell, it doesn't discolor, and it doesn't get hot, and it doesn't really show anything on any kind of imaging or labs. Instead, what I'm experiencing is a sort of profound weakness that results in easier than average sprains and little to no durability. Just something like grabbing an object and holding it for a long period of time is enough to cause me pain for days or weeks. Things like lifting the milk carton, pushing a heavy door, maybe picking up a little something that weighs 10-15 pounds will strain my knees. It takes very, very, very little effort to strain or somewhat sprain a joint, and if they do get sprained, the healing is very slow. Sometimes they just don't seem to heal at all. So I can't do things like hold my phone and doom scroll because my fingers give out after a few minutes. Can't hold a controller to play video games. Can't lift hardly anything. I have to move very particularly, and exercise and physical therapy and occupational therapy and swimming and all of that haven't really made any difference. So I just would like to have stronger joints. Next up, cold sensitivity. That's pretty severe. I cannot do cold weather at all. Just walking through the freezer section at the grocery store is a lot harder on me than it should be. Conversely, I also have sunlight sensitivity, somewhat recently developing this year. The sunlight sensitivity is not a heat sensitivity. I'm actually heat tolerant, resistant, almost immune. Anything under about 105 degrees doesn't really bother me very much, but the sunlight tears me up. It's tough on my eyes. I get sunburned more easily than usual, and for some reason my legs especially will sunburn in literally 1 to 2 minutes. I wish I could say I was making that up, but I'm not. I actually had to get long pants for my walks because like going to the mailbox and back I can get a sunburn. I have mild generalized fatigue, which has improved significantly since the days of treating for dry beriberi, which we'll get to in a little bit. Moderate generalized weakness. I am a weak man, and I also cannot use the strength that I have because using my available strength is very likely to overstress a joint. I have difficulty maintaining muscle mass. I can exercise and build muscle mass, but I build it much slower than the average person. And if I stop exercising, I lose it much faster than the average person. And then finally, I get quite a lot of low back pain, but that's for like a very sort of obvious reason that we'll talk about here in a moment. But the big one is that my joints are just terrible. Like it's difficult to type, it's difficult to handle normal objects, to walk around, the one that's been scaring me is it's hard to log roll in and out of bed because my elbows can't take it. And it recently spread up to my jaw. My jaw joint is similarly agitated, and it limits my ability to speak. So this has been scary for me. Presentation-wise, if I were checking in, I'm a 38-year-old Caucasian male, 6'2", about 180 pounds. The body temperature on intake is going to be a little bit less than normal at 97.7 Fahrenheit. That's just kind of how I run. Heart rate and blood pressure is almost exactly normal, or maybe a few points below normal, so you can call that low normal. The only prescription medication that I'm taking is clomiphene citrate for low testosterone, which we'll get to in a moment. Mentally, I see on my little chart all the time, alert, intelligent, inquisitive, no signs of altered mental state. Patient reports healthy eating. My diet is very healthy, a lot of organic foods, complex carbs, lean meats, very little in the way of added sugar, added fats and processed kind of nonsense. Probably very healthy breakfast, something like oatmeal and berries. Lunch, probably healthy leftovers from the night before, or lunch is where I'm likely to get lazy and just eat a burger or burrito or something, because I mean, this is America, that happens. Dinner is probably something like baked Atlantic salmon, quinoa, and some kind of cruciferous vegetable like broccoli. Frequent exercise. Despite all of my joint pains and complaints and difficulties, whatever, I have almost always exercised 3 or more days a week. That includes weights, cardio, swimming, stretching every single day, walking every single day. I get I get like 1.5 miles to 2 miles of walking every day, a little bit under 7,000 steps a day on Fitbit despite my problems. Good sleep habits, 8 hours of sleep. Try to do that as good as I can. No alcohol or tobacco abuse, no drug abuse or hard drug abuse. I do use cannabis products on occasion for pain, but in pretty moderate amounts. And the thing that you would notice about me in your office is that I move very slowly and deliberately. I don't touch a lot of things. I would give you a very weak handshake, and I would stand up and pace around, showing a clear discomfort with sitting because of my back pain and the need to kind of constantly move my joints, or my knees will lock up. So definitely would seem a little agitated if I were sitting in an office. Unsurprisingly, my medical history is complex, but here's the entire story as succinctly and completely as possible. There was alcohol and cigarette use during my pregnancy. There were drugs used by my mother before and after the pregnancy, but according to her, not during said pregnancy, but I wasn't exactly there to watch. When I was born, I was jaundiced and refused milk and any kind of feeding for the first couple of weeks of my life. In the first year of my life, I had frequent and severe respiratory and ear infections, which I were told obviously did not kill me, but they were in the range to where that could have happened if treatment had gone differently. Growing up, I suffered from very extreme childhood abuse that I'll keep the details short on here in this video. You can find a little bit more about that in the documents that documents my entire medical history, but let's just say that things were done to me that you cannot legally do to prisoners of war. Unsurprisingly, again, childhood psychiatric problems stemming primarily from that abuse, and instead of therapy or anything, they were treated with prescriptions for tofranil, several other tricyclics, SSRIs, antidepressants, etc., except I have a gene that causes me to not metabolize these very well, so I was probably overdosing or struggling to process these meds during most of my childhood. As we move into later childhood, I developed idiopathic pseudotumor cerebri, which is increased swelling in the brain and pressure on the optic nerve. It caused migraines and blurred vision. The migraines were bad and often kind of random, but they could be triggered by the smell of a heater or really loud bassy sounds. The blurred vision was pretty permanent though. The treatment, since this was idiopathic, is that I was treated with loop diuretics, and I got a spinal tap like every other month for several years. It's probably not good for me, but that's what they did to relieve the pressure. I got a couple of horror stories about that, but we can skip those and move on ahead. When I was 13 years old, there was a change in custody, so I was forced to quit all of the tricyclics and SSRIs cold turkey. Not very fun, don't recommend it, but after doing so, the pseudotumor resolved spontaneously, and as far as health in my teenage years, it was largely unremarkable, especially compared to my childhood, except as I grew into my teenage years, I had no beard, and I had mild gynecomastia. I didn't actually get the little tiny chin scruff you see now until I was in my 30s taking clomiphene. And since it's relevant to endocrinology, normal genital development, normal genital hair, normal genitals. There was no reason that I was even kind of a big kid. Nobody suspected that I would have been low on testosterone, which is kind of what all this is moving toward. This last bit I'm going to move through very quickly because we're starting to catch up to the now, and each of these topics is going to have their own big section in a moment. But my early adulthood was also pretty unremarkable. I did get depressed at one point and start taking Zoloft, and something we'll talk about later. I also had to quit Zoloft cold turkey. Really don't recommend that. Not fun. I developed idiopathic hypogonadism, or low testosterone. We ran a ton of tests and scans. There's nothing wrong with my testicles or brain or endocrine system as far as anybody is aware, but I just don't seem to make testosterone. Got an idiopathic thiamine deficiency, truly wild, that one. Spondylolisthesis, also not fun. A tick-borne illness, well, two of them specifically. And I was recently being evaluated for mastocytosis and IgG4 related disease based on some laboratory results, which we're about to dive right into because the next section is on my idiopathic low testosterone. And this is where things start getting weird because I have idiopathic hypogonadism, or low testosterone for the non-medical doctors watching. When untreated, my testosterone is about 34 NGDL. It's sub 50 quite often. But when treated with clomiphene citrate, which is the only treatment I've gotten so far, it rises to about 500 to 700, just kind of depending on the timing in the month or whatever. There are also abnormalities in my FSH, LH, and prolactin, depending on if I'm being treated or not, with the abnormalities showing up when I'm not being treated. And I want to emphasize here that this is idiopathic. I don't have any genetic conditions that cause this. I don't have a pituitary tumor, testicular cancer, any known endocrine abnormalities that can cause this, any drug or lifestyle factors that can cause this. As a matter of fact, this is where I started getting my first psych referrals because the doctor thought that I was faking to get testosterone to get yoked at the gym or whatever. But it was initially treated with clomiphene and anastrozole because when I first took Clomid, it resolved all of my symptoms, which we're going to get to in a moment. They're wild. But it did raise my estrogen a little bit high, so we took anastrozole for 2 years to lower that. After about 2 years, my doctor wanted me to quit both of these medications to see if my system would reboot, as he explained it. I was told that quitting cold turkey with no tapering is fine and we'll retest again in about 3 months. 3 months later is when the worst of my symptoms hit, which we'll talk about in a moment. But obviously we got back on Clomid to stabilize, and the second time there was no estrogen rise and no need for anastrozole. And endocrinologically, my IGF-1 is 97, which is still in range, but it's a little bit low for a man my age. And now for the really weird part. I got paradoxical or opposite symptoms of what you would expect. Low testosterone, especially profoundly low testosterone, is associated with weight gain, depression, erectile dysfunction, pejoratively soy boy or beta male type behavior. I got the opposite. I got hyperarousal. I was sexually active about 4 times per day. I had increased interpersonal aggression. I became very toxic in a lot of ways. Increased exercise tolerance. I was so incredibly high energy that I was going to the gym multiple times per day. I didn't sleep very much at night because I would just wake up and either want to have sex or work out. And I had symptoms bordering on mania. As a matter of fact, the first diagnosis for this problem was that I was probably developing bipolar and was in a manic state. It was only on a friend of mine's recommendation that we checked testosterone and found that it was low. Upon taking clomiphene citrate and restoring my normal endocrine balance, all of these symptoms just kind of went away. I didn't get much in the way of change in weight. I did get slightly lower muscle mass when my testosterone is low, but not crazily. And another odd one is that I weirdly get lower libido when my testosterone values get higher. When they get above about 700, my libido has a tendency to drop a little bit. It doesn't turn to erectile dysfunction, it doesn't bottom out, but it's just a little lower than normal, and I can notice that. And I don't know why these symptoms were so opposite. The first couple of times I went to a doctor about this, I was accused of faking and lying. I wear a lot of gym clothes because they're comfortable. I think they assumed I was trying to get TRT for gym gains or something, but it took multiple rounds of testing to confirm this before I was believed. On the subject of testosterone, I most likely have had low testosterone for my entire life due to the fact that I did not develop a beard growing up. I was always kind of tall and skinny, very smooth skin, no beard or anything. The little stubble you see right now didn't come in until my 30s when I started taking clomiphene. Though I did have a normal puberty, normal genital development, size, shape, whatever, including hair. I did have teenage gynecomastia, which I'm still carrying around a little bit of man boobies from. I've actually never had erectile dysfunction. I've had doctors sit me down and get uncomfortably close and hold my hand and tell me not to be ashamed and it's okay and I can talk about this, and kind of the same thing on the internet. But no matter how low my T got, I never had that problem. I just actually kind of had the opposite problem. And over the course of my life, I always did find it a bit harder to build muscle than my peers. I was always a little skinnier, a little weaker, a little bit less strong, and I still don't really have an answer for why I don't make testosterone and why I don't get the symptoms of low testosterone. I get the symptoms of high testosterone, which is wild. And this leads me into where the symptoms really began, developing beriberi of all things, or thiamine or vitamin B1 deficiency, a true nightmare and the worst thing that I have ever suffered through in my entire life. We'll talk about a lot, but basically during the time that I was advised to discontinue clomiphene, two things happened. Number one is that my joints and tendons started getting a little weaker, a little bit more loosey-goosey and more prone to sprains, but in a kind of minor way. And secondly, I started getting more anxious, more weird feelings, more tingles here and there, and before I knew it, it developed into severe dry beriberi with burning hands and burning feet, with the hands being especially bad. The hands went partially paralytic, had limited use of them. They constantly burned with those electric neuropathic tingles just 24/7. And I spent about 2 years like this. Again, mostly being told, you've got anxiety, this is somatic symptom disorder, you're exaggerating your symptoms, this isn't real, blah, 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 blah. And I kept insisting that something felt very, very wrong in my body. I couldn't keep my food down. I was feeling very anxious and nervous, very kind of weird and all over the place. I started going hypothermic. My body temperature would drop down to 97 and then kind of back up again. And when it went down really low, I started hallucinating. And the big one is that my hands and forearms just burned like they were on fire for years and years and years, which meant I just about could not sleep for several years. I was like 2 years of getting like 10 to 15 minutes of REM sleep at night, which is not good, until eventually a neurologist tested my vitamin B1 and the thiamine deficiency was confirmed. I initially treated with the cheap Walgreens over-the-counter thiamine mononitrate, and then quickly moved over to benfotiamine, which pretty much immediately relieved my symptoms. I started feeling better in like 12 hours, and I was significantly improved after 3 to 4 days, though it did take 9 to 12 months of supplementation for a full recovery for all of the nerve pain to go away. What's weird about this is that it's still considered idiopathic. I don't have any genes or conditions known to cause thiamine disruption or bleeding or processing in any capacity. I don't abuse alcohol or drugs or have a restrictive diet or literally any known thing that can cause thiamine deficiency, and I wasn't starving myself either. So there was no real explanation for this. Now, several years later, I have noticed that this does have a tendency to recur after minor injuries. If I get a big enough sprain, if I do an outpatient surgery, like recently I had my spinal cord stimulator, that triggered beriberi and I had to supplement much more. And I think the minor like tendon injuries that I kind of picked up when discontinuing clomiphene contributed somehow to this onset of beriberi, which went undiagnosed for way too long and caused an outrageous amount of damage to my body. To say nothing of how extremely damaging this is to mental health. Imagine being on fire, burning for years, constant 9 or 10 out of 10 pain that pain relievers and meds do very little to help you with, to the point where you just about can't sleep, you can't do anything, and every single doctor that you go to is, you're faking this, this is a lie, this is nonsense, I don't believe this, these symptoms don't make sense, go to therapy, take SSRIs. And then even when you get the diagnosis, it's more, we don't treat this. How did that happen? What did you do to yourself? I'm going to have to send you to my colleague. You're going to have to figure this out on your own. I'm not qualified. It was a mental health disaster. And I will say that on this entire list of things, even in my entire life, nothing has put me through the ringer quite like beriberi. I have been drowned, strangled, hung, burned, electrocuted, and just generally beaten to a pulp. And I would rather do all of those just in a breakfast burrito every day than I would deal with beriberi for one day. What an absolute nightmare of a disorder. The next medical anomaly that's very relevant to the low testosterone is that I have extremely low bone mineral density. My lumbar DEXA score is negative 4.5, which for the non-doctors watching this video, most places stop measuring at negative 5. So I am like barely on the charts. Hip is close to negative 2, and arm is almost exactly negative 2, which is where osteoporosis begins. I'm a 38-year-old man with extreme osteoporosis, which is very bad. except what's more concerning is that there's no explanation for this. I've kind of run up and down endocrinology and bone mineral density specialty clinics and things like that. My parathyroid is not overactive. It's actually low normal. It's just one, I think it's like measured like 16 last time, kind of barely in range. You can see more of this in the documents. Vitamin D is normal, alkaline phosphatase is normal, normal serum calcium. Now I do have high calcium in my urine, but the serum calcium is normal. CTX is a little bit high at 616 pg/ml, and most importantly, there are no genetic or infectious diseases related to my bones. No osteomalacia, no type of bone infection or bone cancer or a genetic disorder, or really anything that explains this. The last bone mineral density expert I saw said it was because I had low testosterone, but even still, that's very extreme for simple low testosterone. And it also doesn't really track with my lifestyle. Now, I am not a doctor. You're welcome to tell me that I'm wrong here. But if my low bone mineral density was due to low testosterone, it probably would have been something that accumulated over the course of my life, right? But my life has been very rambunctious. I've had a very high impact activity lifestyle. I did combat sports like football in college. I did medieval combat recreation, just hitting people with pole arms and maces and taking huge hits, sometimes unarmored. I did stunts for my short films, including letting people slam me, punches, stunt falls, parkour, 2- and 3-story drops off buildings. I have a history of significant falls. I couldn't tell you how rambunctious of a life that I have lived. And in that time, I have never broken a bone until age 30. Getting hit by a car did not break my bones. The only fracture that I got was a non-traumatic L5-S1 pars vertebra fracture after standing up from a chair. I just sat and stood up and it popped. And that's the only break I've ever gotten in my life, despite a very high impact lifestyle. And what's wild is that even after that happened, I was still lifting a lot of weights, benching, squatting, deadlifting over 200 pounds. I fell down the stairs once or twice. I slipped and fell on both concrete and the tile. I actually passed out, ate a bad burrito and the gas made my blood pressure go wobbly. I just passed out and hit the floor hard in the bathroom, got attacked by a dog. Days before these measurements were taken, I was at the gun range shooting high caliber machine guns around, and no fractures. So to me, this doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't understand how the only fracture I've gotten is from standing up from a chair and none of the other stuff. When my bone mineral density is so bad, I might as well be Mr. Glass. At least that's what they tell me. And nobody really knows why, except, well, you've got low T. Oh, and I would like to add that I'm somewhat famous now for being the guy who games and does podcast appearances from a bed. That's not how I live all day. It's kind of difficult to beat that perception. I'm not Mr. 200 steps in bed all day. I exercise 3 days a week, hit 7,000 steps a day. I'm up vertical, walking, doing things, probably 6 to 8 hours a day, just kind of depending. My problem is that it's just really hard for me to sit in a chair because of the pars defect. So if I have to sit for a long time, like a long gaming stream, it's easier for me to do it from the bed, much less painful. But that does lead me into my next topic, which is an L5-S1 pars defect. Many of you may know me as the gamer who streams from a bed or does podcast appearances from the bed or is always laying down, and the reason for that is that I have a chronic bilateral pars defect at L5-S1 that also includes spondylolisthesis grade 1 at L5-S1. For the non-doctors watching, that's fancy talk for the pars vertebra that holds your vertebra together, has broken, did not fuse, and my spine slipped over another, so it is very out of alignment, and that crushes a whole cluster of nerves and causes a lot of different kinds of pain. On top of that, I have almost total disc collapse at L4, L5, and S1. It's barely not bone-on-bone grinding. It's pretty rough back there. I initially got very successful conservative treatment for this in my early 30s. I responded very well to physical therapy and basically planked my way back to victory. I was the guy who followed instructions perfectly, who never took risk, who worked out very hard and built a super strong core. And I was like 80% cured at the end of my first run of treatment. Unfortunately, some of these other ailments, which we've talked about and several of the ones to come, were very debilitating and caused me to get weaker and my core muscles to disappear and my stability to go away. And I subsequently re-injured or restrained that vertebra 3, maybe 4 more times over the course of a year. And each time my ability to recover and return to some semblance of normal got worse and worse. What this does is it prevents me from sitting comfortably for more than about 15 minutes at a time. I did get a spinal cord stimulator implant, so it's a little bit better now, but for most of this story, I've had a 15-minute time limit. I can get severe pain from sitting more than 30 minutes. This type of pain in most patients I know presents with sciatica. I get some sciatica, but not a lot. Most of my pain is like in my back itself at the point that it broke. The pain lasts for days to months if I push past my limit. It's not a kind of thing to where I can just like suck it up for an hour and then shake it off. I'm fine the next day. Usually be weeks, months. Sometimes if I push my luck too far, it's just permanent pain. I have the exact same limit for side laying, so I can't lay on my side. So pretty much all I've got, oh, and standing. I can't stand still like at attention. I have to be moving a little bit. So pretty much all I've got is laying flat on my back or kind of walking or pacing a bit. Lots of normal movements are restricted, but sitting being the most difficult one because the whole world is designed around sitting. Notably, the pain that I experience is considered much worse and in a different area than is expected of my grade of injury. Most of my pain is in the spine. Because the pain that I have complained about is worse than what doctors would expect for my age and weight and type of injury, and because I would say I don't have sciatica, I have pain in the spine itself, and it's quite severe. Got a lot of psych referrals from orthopedic doctors. They didn't look highly upon this. And this is probably the most uniquely disabling thing about my current situation, because if you think about it, if I were in, say, a wheelchair, I could still use handicap accessible things. I could still go out. I could still do stuff. It'd be slower and it wouldn't be great. But when you can't sit, you can't even use a wheelchair. When you can't sit, you can't drive anywhere. When you can't sit, you can't go to a theater. You can't bend over. You can't wait in the doctor's office. You can't go to a restaurant. The sheer amount of things is very, very limiting. I don't realize I'm sitting now, but I'm doing so very briefly. I basically sit down, record this, and then I'm done for like an hour. Not a good way to live. Despite this, again, I still exercise. I still get my steps in. I looked at my Fitbit today. Apparently I walk 3 miles a day. Walking's not a problem. It's really just sitting. I did get a spinal cord stimulator implant to help with the pain because this cannot be surgically corrected because the bone density is so low. So they gave me the spinal cord stimulator to help me deal with it while we figure out what's going wrong with the bone density and make me a better candidate for surgery. This would be an important place to mention that I've had the worst run of orthopedic doctors. I have had more psych referrals from orthopedic doctors than anybody else. I had a doctor one time take his thumbs and push in on the spondylo, which was very painful. It made me yelp and move away. Apparently that was evidence that I'm a faker because I should only feel it in my legs and not my back. I had an orthopedic doctor cancel a surgery while I was on a table because I was already hooked up and about to be knocked out. And they said, you didn't report enough pain today. I had an orthopedic doctor tell a joke with me that I should go to Europe for medical care. And I said, why? He's like, they have really good painless euthanasia options there. And he thought that was like a hilarious joke. I've been called a baby, weak, a variety of other things. And I don't know what has happened in the field of orthopedics. I've had a very wildly negative run there to the point where I just don't go to orthopedic doctors anymore unless something is like profoundly wrong or broken. I have a good one now. Took a long time to get there though. Now is where things start getting really weird because I tested positive for 2 tick-borne illnesses, Babesia and Bartonella infections on 2 different tests from a company called IgeneX, which is a private laboratory that specializes in some ultra-sensitive tests to find a variety of tick-borne illnesses. Notably, I never tested positive for Lyme or Ehrlichia or any of these other tick-borne illnesses, just these 2, but I tested positive for them twice. This was not reproducible at Quest or at LabCorp, but my understanding is that their labs are kind of outdated, antiquated, or just not very accurate for these types of illnesses. However, at the time, I did have a lot of symptoms that were similar to systemic tick-borne illnesses: migrating polyarthralgia, weird temperature problems, neurological problems. I had issues with my digestion. I had night sweats. I had night terrors. I had a whole bunch of different things going on. And it took a very long time to get treatment for this because almost no real doctors in the state of Texas would treat me. There's just not hardly any infectious disease doctors here that are experienced, qualified, or willing to take a case like this of systemic and long-term Bartonellosis or babesiosis. I got a lot of no's. I got a lot of "we're not qualified." I lost count of how many people we called. Had a couple of offices, infectious disease offices, tell me that Lyme isn't real and that tick-borne illnesses aren't real and that chronic or long-term infections aren't real, which isn't fun. But eventually I did find a real infectious disease doctor that would treat me, which was a blessing because my alternatives were about to be chiropractors and homeopaths. This was treated with atovaquone, or I think that's the Malarone for the Babesia, and clindamycin for 4 weeks. I got some very good results from that. About 6 months later, the symptoms recurred. So then we did atovaquone, clindamycin, and azithromycin for 6 weeks, which got a much stronger and longer lasting positive result. I was supposed to do 8 weeks, but we discontinued at 6 weeks because I started getting heart palpitations. I was kind of having a hard time keeping my food down, and they decided that 6 weeks was probably enough. After receiving treatment for this, my joint pain massively improved. It still improved today over what it was then, though it's not good today. Night sweats stopped almost immediately. Temperature, like hypothermia and stuff like that, became much less frequent. Notably, my nightmares stopped immediately. I used to have nightmares every single night, and they stopped like 2 days into this. My REM sleep rose from 15 minutes a night, which I'd been having for about years. I guess it was all nightmares, to about an hour and a half, just rapidly after this treatment. And it's still the single most helpful thing that I have done for my condition. The only problem is that post-treatment effects don't seem to last. So am I getting anti-inflammatory benefits from the antibiotics? Are we treating something that's maybe not these diseases? Is there an underlying problem going on? I don't exactly know for sure. I just know that, another Bartonella-like symptom I had that I forgot about. So I had the sore feet. It was very painful to walk for a long time. They just get sore easier than they should. Sore hands sometimes. Anything with small blood vessels was pretty moody. And I also had pain from like the weight of my blanket touching my feet. That was really bad. It seemed very silly of me at the time, but treating for Bartonella and Babesia was very, very helpful. But I guess maybe it's recurred again. The effects don't seem to last. And the problem is I can't get this officially diagnosed on like official labs. It's only on these sort of alternative Lyme industry labs, which have a whole wide variety of issues around their accuracy. And even when I contacted the lab that gave me these results and asked them for a doctor for treatment, they recommended me 3 chiropractors, 1 homeopath, and 1 naturopath, and not a single MD on the list. And when I asked if they had any MDs, that's when they stopped talking to me. So that's really not a good sign. And I wish that I could travel to the Northeast to some state where there are experts that deal with this type of disease. But with my back and my condition as is, I live in Plano, Texas. If I travel to Dallas, I have to get a hotel. Leaving the city that I'm in might as well be going to the moon for me. So I can't like fly to New York or travel or do anything like a reasonable person. And they won't do telehealth either. So yay, I'm kind of stuck on that. As if all of that wasn't weird enough, I was recently very thoroughly evaluated for mastocytosis or mast cell activation syndrome. More specifically, they were looking for bone marrow mastocytosis because of the osteoporosis. They think that's something that might have caused it. And in the initial testing, we found that my tryptase was elevated. We also discovered that I have hereditary alpha tryptosemia, which kind of carries its own weird association of symptoms, though I don't fit all of those super well. But weirdly, in this picture, I have no allergies at all. I got tested for allergies. Every single one came back negative. I can't remember ever having an allergy or a flare-up or a skin reaction or a trigger or anything like what you would typically see with a mast cell disorder. I got a KIT gene mutation test, which were all negative as well, including some very fancy ones that I paid a lot of money for. did a bunch of urine tests, I think leukotrienes and something else. And basically there were no other labs suspicious of MCAS, so they decided not to do a bone marrow biopsy. I know the bone marrow biopsy is the sure way to guarantee this or rule it out, but given the fact that my bone mineral density is already insanely low and I have to lay in a position that's going to hurt me in order to do it, and there's a higher chance of complications because of that low bone mineral density, it was decided that the 1% chance that I have KIT gene negative mastocytosis with no other symptoms is probably not worth risking the bone marrow biopsy. Similarly, or not similarly, similarly weird, I was evaluated for IgG4 related disease because when we tested my immunoglobulin subclasses, my IgG4 came back elevated at 165. My understanding is that's definitely on the lower end of what IgG4 disease would qualify, like the bottom end of the cutoff, so borderline. Again, typically it would be much higher, but weirdly my IgG1 is low. It's below normal. The IgM total is either borderline or low depending on the day and time of testing, so we definitely have some sort of immune imbalance here. We have inflammatory cytokines of tumor necrosis alpha and interleukin 10 elevated. Those are the only ones that are elevated. None of the other ones are. They're all very normal, and I am aware that these can affect bone mineral density. When I'm testing, I usually get slightly elevated albumin or slightly elevated ferritin. So hyperalbuminemia or hyperferritis by like a couple of percentage points, just kind of depending on the day. I had a low lactate dehydrogenase on one test, but no symptoms or known causes for that. Follow-up tests were normal, and I did a huge amount of rheumatology labs, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. You can check them out in the documents, and vitamin panels, all of which came back normal. So in regards to IgG4 related disease, the real take home here is that I got multiple CT scans and MRIs with and without contrast and ultrasounds and various things, and there was no evidence of fibrosing anywhere. To be sure, doctors at UT Southwestern recently did a double check with multiple radiologists to make sure there was no fibrosing, and there isn't. So there's no evidence of any organ involvement. There's no classic IgG4 related disease symptoms. I did have some orbital swelling because I know you can have an orbital version of that, but it was self-resolving and didn't really fit the pattern of IgG4. It's pretty much all gone now. So the evaluation is there's no clear target for biopsy. There's no fibrosing organs, there's no weird growths, there's nothing wrong with my lacrimal glands. My doctors don't want to give me a blind biopsy because that's another surgery with a sedative that might put me back into beriberi for whatever reason when they don't really know what they're looking for, so there's no way to confirm or deny IgG4 related disease. And unfortunately, I can't simply just take prednisone for a bit and see if I feel better because that would do terrible things to my already terrible bone mineral density. But we've got two more weird ones to throw at you today. And here we are at something even stranger in my medical records, which is imaging negative growths in my left forearm, specifically kind of usually between the two bones here, tibia and fibia, I think they are. There's about a half a dozen small and unusually shaped growths. Most of them are sitting on tendons or near blood vessels. I've had them image a bunch of times and they don't appear to be cysts. They're not perfectly spherical either. They're a little bit more almost like a spear or a ball that's been smushed and deformed a little bit, kind of oddly shaped, perhaps saucer shaped, but not entirely round or consistent. They're deep enough to not be visible to the naked eye. There's no discoloration or swelling around the spots, nothing that makes them obviously visibly there. However, several doctors have been described them as palpable or touchable. They can feel them in office exams when you run your fingers up and down my arm. You can feel the little lumps sitting on my tendons. They are painful to the touch. They are painful in general, and especially painful when I'm using my arm. Like when I've actually done things with my arm, like exercise, they have a tendency to get more painful. Where this gets weird is that they're completely imaging negative. MRI, CT, ultrasound, pretty much everything that you do to try to image these little growths comes back as absolutely nothing. I even had a full MRI with and without contrast and it came back with nothing, yet I can go to the doctor's office and the doctor can palpate these little growths. I was refused an exploratory biopsy because, again, it's imaging negative and the doctor told me he'd just be going in blind and that would be really dangerous to do in this region without like clear imaging guidance. But it is weird. I probably have about a half a dozen small lumps that sit on the tendons in this left arm, and this is the weaker arm with the weaker elbow and the weaker fingers. But I cannot get this imaged, and nobody can really tell me what these are, what to do about them, other than a lot of doctors say that since they're small and they're not showing up on imaging, they probably not an immediate problem compared to other things. And then finally, something that's not good, but a little bit more normal, maybe, only a mild paradox here, is I have some kidney problems. I have a SLC7A9 cysteine urea. It's heterozygous, so I don't get the full effect of that. I did some testing on this. I have elevated urinary cysteine, about double the normal, or double what a normal maximum would be. I do have parapelvic renal cysts, a little cluster of them. Thankfully, they don't appear to be impairing the pelvis or preventing urine collection or doing anything, and they're not even painful, but they are quite big. It's kind of weird that they're that big and not causing any problems. And the paradox I run into is that I have good EGFR, which for the non-doctors watching, that's your sort of general measurement for kidney filtration. EGFR is really good. I do have some elevated cysteine in urine, elevated lysine, elevated urine sodium, and elevated urine chloride with hypercalciuria, or elevated calcium in urine, though that is mild. They're all there. I also have elevated urine creatine, so my kidneys are leaking a lot of different things, and I have a disorder that's supposed to cause a pretty crazy amount of kidney stones, but the filtration rate is still good, and I've only ever had one kidney stone in my life. That's when I was moving from Mississippi to Texas, and I pretty much just lived on Monster energy drinks and fast food for a week, and then I got a kidney stone. But outside of that, I've never had a single kidney stone with little to no dietary modifications. I haven't done apparently if you have cystinuria, you're not supposed to eat meat or salt or anything like that, and to watch out for methionine and all sorts of stuff. And I never really did that, and I never got any kidney stones, and I don't exactly know why. Maybe it's just because I drink a bunch of water, but that is the end of the actual medical problems. Outside of this, I have no more medical problems, but it would probably be important to go over my mental health history, because a lot of people believe that this is a mental problem instead of a physical one. Obviously, plenty of people on the internet, and occasionally some doctors as well. They'll dismiss all of these tests and just say, nah, you're just stressed or something like that. So I'm going to be honest with you all. This is going to be a little bit of a weird one and rough one, but let's open up about mental health. And now we're at the part you've all been waiting for. What is Drift0r's mental health like? My mental health records are public and linked in the documents below, but we'll do an overview here, and my short version is I think it's not good, but it's better than it should be given the circumstances. So I grew up with extreme childhood trauma. I don't want to go through all of the stories here on this video, but I know what it's like to be strangled, to be touched by adults in ways that they should not touch children. I know what it's like to be in something very similar to solitary confinement for a long time. I know what it's like to be hunted like an animal, to be shot at. I know what it's like to catch an adult doing things to a child that they should not be doing, and then getting the blame for it and receiving a punishment that I can only best describe as belonging in the Old Testament. I know what it's like to have doctors not believe you and dump you out of a wheelchair onto a floor to prove that you're faking, so much so that hospital security has to get involved. I know what it's like to get 2 spinal taps back to back, as in 5 minutes apart with no anesthetic, with nurses sitting on your arms and legs on the table, so all you can do is squirm and scream while they take that second dose out, and to take full-grown adult beatings when you're 9. I went through a lot of very, very, very bad stuff, the kind of stuff that tends to break people, and the kind of stuff that tends to literally generate mental health issues. I also know what it's like to care for parents that have back injuries, parents that have mental health issues, other relatives and families that have mental health issues or blindness or varying disorders and things, caretaker fatigue to the extreme, and distrust to the extreme. It is a perfect combination for creating somebody that would be described as a hypochondriac, or the type of person that would fake an illness for attention, which is what I'm often accused of. And the best I can do is I'm really not. I wish that was the case. My problems would be a lot easier. Because of that abuse, and probably because I watched too much Sci-Fi Channel growing up, I had lifelong nightmares and night terrors, which I repurposed here on this channel into the Epic Dream series to try to turn something good out of something horrific. Because of this abuse, I had frequent hallucinations of ghosts and demons and spirits and whatnot talking to me up until about age 13, when I discontinued the medicines that we'll talk about here in a moment. And I know that I've told these stories on PKA, and that community and the rest of the internet has just kind of taken off and run with these as if I believe that I have demons in my blood and that ghosts are real and that I can commune with the dead and nonsense like that. I told these more as campfire stories. Other people believe that I believe that they're real. I believe that these are hallucinations that come from an extremely sick child who's in an extremely abusive environment. During that time, I got diagnosed with a multitude of disorders as a child, the majority of which were not done by reputable doctors. I was treated with adult doses of tofranil, other tricyclics, SSRIs, certain medications that would just knock me out, just make him be calm or whatever. And I'm a CYP2D6 intermediate metabolizer, a little bit of a mouthful there, which means I don't process a lot of these medicines like a normal person. And since they were giving me adult doses, I was probably overdosing on these in some capacity for my entire childhood, which can't have been good. My teenage years were uneventful, minus being forced to quit all of my meds cold turkey, quitting all those SSRIs and stuff. That was really brutal. I, in college, developed sleep avoidant insomnia due to the extreme nightmares getting worse and worse and worse and having persistent characters that come back and things like that. Again, that's where the Epic Dream series came from. In my late 20s, I got diagnosed with depression because I was having some marital problems and it really got me down bad. That depression was very successfully treated with Zoloft. Unfortunately, an emergency trip home to help my dad after surgery caused me to lapse in taking Zoloft for about a week. And when I tried to get back on it, it never really uptook quite the same again. And when I went back to the psychiatrist to talk about maybe weaning off or doing something different, he wanted to double or triple my dose, which I didn't really like. And maybe I'm not a good patient, but it ended up with us having a screaming contest in his office, and I told him that I want to quit this medication and I want his help to taper, and he said he will only write me a prescription for more and not a tapering prescription. So I said, I'll do it cold turkey, and he's like, all right, good luck with that. And he also wrote me up as a drug abuser, so I got my insurance rates went through the roof here in Texas. In my later 20s, maybe very early 30s, just before all of this started happening, I returned to therapy for misophonia. There's certain noises and things that are very triggering to my PTSD, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I was starting to get therapy for that, and as the health issues crept up and kept getting worse and worse, I decided to just stay in therapy to try to help deal with all of this and try to help keep my mind balanced as best as I can, and with that little bit of mental health history. So I had several psychiatric evaluations over the course of this. A lot of times I just come to a doctor's office with all this weird stuff, and it would be immediate straight psych eval. So the first one, which was done by my therapist, I was diagnosed with somatic symptom disorder. This would later be reversed, but in the very broad sense of that, if you have symptoms that can't be explained by laboratory results for over 6 months, you get diagnosed with somatic symptom disorder. The eval 2 was the psychiatrist that wanted or was called in to treat that. I had a normal brain scan and CNS and sort of evaluation. I wasn't deemed to have anxiety or psychosis or depression or BPD or any of these other kind of things. And basically, the psychiatrist said that I'm not presenting like a mental health case, and I've got a variety of unusual laboratory results, and he would be reluctant to treat that with SSRIs when the endocrinology is so abnormal. Eval number 3 was a few years later. This one I added asterisks next to because it was a complete disaster. The intake nurse practitioner, was immediately hostile with me within 3 minutes, and told me I was faking everything within 5 minutes. And I just conversations like, okay, that I'm here to be evaluated and that's your opinion, but did you read the labs that I submitted through the portal? And then she got super mad and said that she doesn't need to read labs to tell that I'm a faker. And I'm like, okay, that's great. When the supervising physician came in for his evaluation, He was very confused by the whole thing, sort of admonished the nurse. We looked at all the forms, and it's basically, well, he doesn't report anxiety or depression. He doesn't, he bathes, he grooms, he meditates, he goes to therapy, maintains a job, maintains relationships, exercise, good sleep habits, good eating habits, no drug abuse. There's nothing that we typically treat here. So I was given no psychiatric diagnosis. Evaluation number 4 was done once again because nobody believes anything I have to say with these weird illnesses. That one was pretty straightforward. The physician listened and she said that she doesn't think I have a psychiatric problem because of the same reasons. There's no reported anxiety. The depression is proportional to the suffering I'm experiencing. There's no self-harm, there's no lack of sleep, there's no not showering, there's no major deviations to life. The dude is in therapy, he's doing mindfulness meditations. There's nothing for me to medicate here, though she did say, I believe it was, that I probably present very poorly because I can't sit down. She's like, not a lot of patients pace around my office because they can't sit or stand still. So you probably look to a whole lot of people like you've got anxiety. Eval number 5 was one that I had to do before I got the spinal cord stimulator implant. I was deemed normal and fit for surgery, or not likely to avoid PT, not likely to self-harm and things like that. And then I redid with the same therapist the somatic symptom disorder evaluation, and that one was reversed. After many years of working through all the things that treat somatic symptom disorder and seeing the labs continue to pile up with abnormalities, she changed her opinion to, well, this is probably a physical problem. So finally, that leaves us with, what are my opinions about my own mental health? Well, I think it's almost certain that I have PTSD from my childhood and life experiences. It's the hypervigilant variety, the kind that kind of always keeps me on my toes and scanning for threats and things like that. It manifests in interpersonal relationships as mild to moderate paranoia in that I distrust people's motivations. I don't think that I have anxiety. Incredible that somebody under 40 will say that, but that's an emotion that I feel very rarely in my life, though I have felt it. I don't think I fit any sort of anxiety disorder criteria. I definitely do have depression, just in general, and especially due to life circumstances recently. And as you saw from the rest of this video, life has thrown me some huge L's recently due to my illness. I have lost my sense of self. I'm no longer the gamer I used to be. I can't go to the movie theater. I can't hold controllers in my hands. I've lost a tremendous amount of things. I lost out on all sorts of professional development opportunities, all sorts of fun opportunities. I lost out on my opportunity to start a family because now I'm way too ill to take care of a child. Lost out on my opportunity to retire early because instead of working and getting over that fire hump, now I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and I'm behind on money. I've missed opportunities to go to events, to travel the world, to do so many things, and I'm stuck in my city, man. I can't travel. I can't do a whole lot of normal stuff. I can't even enjoy normal things around the house. It's very, very, very frustrating, and these are a huge amount of L's piled upon a person in a short period of time, and there's no way you come out on the other side of that the same person. I think that I came out more beleaguered, more stressed, less witty, less sharp, less kind, honestly, less personable, less patient, generally just a worse version of myself. In terms of how I behave, I believe I'm lacking a sense of shame, which is kind of odd, lacking social skills. My wife describes me as the only extrovert she's ever met that doesn't have social skills. I'm bad at setting boundaries, and I do believe that I have newly developed health anxiety, if we're talking about anxiety. I would call it health PTSD. If you've been living like I've been living, where if you pour your cereal milk wrong, you sprain your wrist and it stays sprained for 6 weeks, and that happens a dozen times, you start getting worried about doing normal things. Or, oh, you roll your ankle and it just stays rolled for 3 years or something like that. And all these little injuries, especially joint related, or the berry burning for 2 years straight while everybody told me I was crazy, that definitely causes health anxiety. I think about and I worry about my health quite a lot. I don't believe it's unreasonable to do so, given how easily it is that I am hurt, but it is a real thing that does tax my mental health. So all of this to say that I do believe that I have some mental health problems. I believe it's one of those things where I am not doing well, but I'm doing really well given the ridiculousness of the physical health of these circumstances. I'm taking it about as well as anybody could. I like to think of myself as Randy Marsh. You know, you get up, you spit the blood out of your mouth, and you tell life, I didn't hear no bell, because that's just kind of how I've always solved my problems. It's not easy, it's not fun, but I'm trying to chug through it and do the best things I can do, and do my meditation and do my therapy and try to stay focused and stay mindful and keep working toward a solution here, which is what this video is trying to be. And finally, for our outro, I want to know if any of you have any idea of what's going on with me, because I personally have no idea. My labs and symptoms don't match each other. I mostly have paradoxical symptoms given the labs. The symptoms I do have are unexplained a lot of times. I recently got back from UT Southwestern where they told me I don't fit any clear diagnosis category, that whatever's wrong with me likely doesn't have a name yet, or it's a very sort of unique or novel combination of other diseases that are very obfuscating. And I also don't have any straightforward solution for improving the quality of my life. Right now, I'm just kind of experimenting with things. Over the course of making this video, I've gotten off of clomiphene and onto regular injectable TRT. I'm going to see if that helps, if maybe it's an endocrine problem. I want to take Forteo to improve the quality of my bones because the changes in my spine are degenerative and I have to eventually get a fusion, and you really don't want to do that at -4 or less Z-score. So I'm trying to make that as good as possible, but the Forteo can cause me kidney stones because I already have high calcium in my urine, and it's a lot of rock and hard place solutions. If I treat one thing, I likely make another thing worse, so it's kind of challenging here. So I really don't know what's going on, and I hope that all of you can perhaps tell me what's going on. My best personal guess, my next step, is I'm going to once again investigate the Bartonella diagnosis. I think Bartonella explains the weird immunoglobulin subclass imbalance, the weird joint pain, maybe the thiamine deficiency due to infection, and a lot of the moving parts of this could be explained by a long-term or chronic tick-borne illness, even though that's not really like a real medical thing. But I'm reluctant to do that because I hate engaging with the Lyme conspiracy community on this, and all the quack doctors and all the fake doctors and all the nonsense surrounding it. So it's kind of make your own choices and pick your own poison in treating it. And I'm really hoping that somebody here on the internet can offer me a clearer solution than that of what is going on. My goals are really twofold. Number one, I want to improve my joints so that I am strong enough to work out and build my core and get a little bit more mobility in my body. And number two, rebuild my bones enough so that when I do eventually have to get this fusion, it's not a 90% chance of failure. That's really it. That's the 1 and 2. If we can do those things, I consider that a win. I'm getting very tired. If you can't tell, I'm getting less clear with my speech and more run down. So I want to say thank you for all of you that watched this entire long, wild video. Definitely check out the files that are down there in the description. If you have anything useful, please contact me via email or Discord. I should have open DMs on X, but I'm not quite as active on that platform. Please let me know if you know anything that's useful. Drifter out.